I never meant to stare. But when she stood by the window, fingers tugging at the cord of the blinds, the slant of the late evening sun caught her profile in a way I'd never seen before, sharp and soft at once, a woman who carried both certainty and something unspoken in the set of her shoulders. The office was too quiet. Everyone had already gone home, their chairs pushed in, their screens black. Only the tick of the wall clock and the faint hum of the vending machine down the hall remained. She drew the blinds shut, each clatter of plastic slats sounding louder than it should. Then, with a small exhale, she turned toward me. "No," she said, her lips curving into something between amusement and weariness. "We're off the clock." I almost answered too quickly, but the words caught in my throat. I nodded instead, shifting the stack of reports in my hands like I suddenly needed something to do with them. She wasn't just the secretary. Not to me. Not anymore. Her name was Clara, and she was at least 20 years older than me. 45, if I remembered her joking once over coffee in the break room. Middle-aged, she'd called herself, brushing it off with a shrug that seemed rehearsed. But when she spoke, people listened. And when she looked at me, really looked, it felt as though she'd found something I hadn't even realized I was giving away. "You stay too late," she said now, tilting her head at the reports. "I could say the same about you." My voice came out steadier than I felt, but my palms were damp against the paper. Her laugh was soft, quick, and it lingered a second longer in the air than it should have. She leaned back against the edge of her desk, arms folding. The blouse she wore, ivory, with a faint sheen, shifted with her, and I noticed how the fabric gathered at her elbows, how the neckline framed the faint hollow at her throat. I set the reports down, slower than necessary. "Maybe I like the quiet," I offered. Her eyes lingered on me then. Longer than was polite. Long enough that I had to drop my gaze to the grain of the desk. She murmured, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. When she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, the motion was careful, deliberate, though her fingers trembled just slightly. The silence stretched. I should have said something, anything, but instead I found myself watching the way her hand rested on the desk, her nails short, neat, tapping once as though in thought. Without meaning to, I mirrored the motion on my side of the wood, fingers just inches away from hers. She noticed. I could tell by the way her breath hitched, by the way her gaze flicked down before returning to my face. "Quiet can be dangerous," she said finally, her voice low. I swallowed, heat prickling the back of my neck. "Depends who you're quiet with." The words hung there, heavier than I intended, and for a moment she didn't move. Her lips parted as if to reply, but then she pressed them together, eyes narrowing slightly, not in anger, but in thought. The blinds behind her rattled softly from the breeze of the air vent. The light in the room had dimmed, that strange in-between glow where everything feels slowed, uncertain. Her hand shifted just a little closer, not touching mine, but near enough that the space between seemed to buzz. I could smell the faint trace of her perfume, something warm, amber-like, lingering even after a long day. I held my breath. Then, just as she tilted toward me, the doorknob rattled. The door didn't open. Just a brief shake, then footsteps retreating down the hallway. Probably the janitor. Still, the sound left the air between us heavier than before, like someone had just caught us mid-thought. Clara straightened quickly, smoothing her blouse with both hands. "We should," she began, but stopped. The rest of the sentence never came. I forced a laugh that sounded too thin. "Yeah. Right." But neither of us moved. I told myself not to stare, not to linger on the faint creases at the corners of her mouth or the way her perfume softened as it warmed on her skin. Still, my eyes betrayed me. She noticed. She always did. "You're young," she said after a moment, almost to herself. Her gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder, like she didn't want to see the reaction she was provoking. I shifted on my feet. "You've mentioned that before. And you don't think it matters?" Her voice was steady, but her fingers tugged slightly at her bracelet, turning it round and round her wrist. "It only matters if you think it does." That earned me a look. Sharp, searching. But beneath it, something softer. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she said, I was married once. 12 years. Ended quietly, too quietly, maybe. Sometimes silence can be worse than shouting. She breathed out a laugh, dry and humorless. I suppose that's why I don't linger. I didn't know what to say. Her words sat heavy between us, and I wondered how often she thought about that ending when she stayed late in this empty office. I've never been married, I said finally, clumsy in comparison. Barely made it through one serious relationship. College girlfriend. She said I didn't know what I wanted. Maybe she was right. Clara tilted her head. And do you? I hesitated, because the honest answer was standing 3 feet away from me, looking at me like she half expected me to vanish if she blinked too long. Sometimes I think I do. Her lips parted as if to press the point, but instead she leaned over the desk, reaching for the stack of reports I'd left. Her shoulder brushed mine. Just a glancing touch, but enough to stop my breath short. Excuse me, she murmured, though she didn't step away immediately. The faint warmth of her arm against mine, the whisper of her hair near my cheek, it was nothing, and it was everything. I pretended to busy myself with straightening the edge of a folder, but my hand shook, betraying me. She noticed that too. Her eyes flicked down, then back up to my face. A silence stretched, thick, before she finally pulled back, clutching the papers to her chest as though they were armor. You're impossible, she said under her breath. I smiled without meaning to. So are you. Her laugh this time was real, startled, even a little embarrassed. She looked away quickly, tucking her hair behind her ear. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because, she trailed off, pressing her lips together. The light caught in her eyes, hesitation, warning, but also something she wasn't naming. I leaned against the desk, careful not to close the gap too much, but unwilling to step back. Because people talk? Or because you think I'll regret it? Her silence was answer enough. The office clock ticked louder, filling the void. She placed the reports down again, her hand brushing mine in the process. Not accidental this time. A light, lingering touch that lasted half a second too long. I didn't move. Couldn't. She withdrew, quickly, almost guiltily. But the moment had already changed something, made the air different, charged, fragile. You should go home, she said finally, though her voice wavered. I nodded, but didn't reach for my coat yet. Instead, I looked at her, really looked. The faint flush in her cheeks, the way her chest rose and fell faster than before, the line of her mouth pressed too tight. She glanced back at me once more. For the briefest second, either of us masked anything. Not the longing. Not the regret. Not the fact that both of us were standing too close and not moving away. I didn't speak. Neither did she. But when her hand brushed mine again, slower this time, deliberate, she didn't pull back. And I didn't either. Her hand lingered in mine, that small, defiant contact, and for a moment neither of us dared breathe. Then, the shrill buzz of her phone shattered it. Clara flinched, pulling back as if burned. She snatched the phone from her desk, glanced at the screen, and pressed it face down without answering. I tried to laugh, but it came out strained. Saved by the bell? She didn't return the smile. Instead, she pressed her fingertips to her temple, shaking her head. This is reckless, she whispered. The words should have pushed me back. Instead, they pulled me forward. Only if someone finds out. Her eyes shot to mine, sharp, warning. That's not funny. I'm not joking. Silence. Just the hum of the lights, the faint whoosh of the air vent, the echo of the clock. She folded her arms, though it looked more like she was holding herself together. You don't understand how people talk. An office, an age gap. I stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but close enough that I could smell the faint trace of her perfume again, warm and earthy. Maybe I don't care what they say. Her lips parted, but no words came. The blinds rattled softly from the air vent again. Her gaze flicked to the window, then back to me, as though afraid of being seen, even here, in the empty after-hours office. "You're 24, she said at last, her voice low, almost pained. "You could be my—" "Don't," I cut in, shaking my head. "Don't say it." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. She turned away, busying herself with stacking papers that didn't need stacking. I watched the way her hands trembled just slightly, the way she bit her lip to steady herself. I moved closer, just enough that when she set the papers down, my hand brushed hers again. She didn't pull back this time. "Clara," I said, her name quiet, almost a plea. She looked up sharply. For a heartbeat, for two, we were inches apart. I could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the faint smear of tired lipstick, the way her breath caught. Her eyes dropped to my mouth. And I leaned forward, just slightly, my heart pounding so loud it filled the silence. The click of the door handle froze us both. We jerked apart as the door cracked open. A voice called in. "Clara? You still here?" It was Diane, one of the assistants. Clara's voice was calm, practiced. "Yes, just finishing up some files." "All right. Don't stay too late," Diane said, the door closing again with a hollow thud. We stood in silence, the pulse of what almost happened beating between us. Her shoulders sagged, and she let out a shaky breath. "See? This is exactly what I mean." I should have apologized. Should have backed away. Instead, I found myself whispering, "If she'd walked in 1 minute later." Her eyes snapped to mine, startled, almost furious. But beneath it, something else. Something raw. "Don't," she said again, but softer this time. I nodded, but my feet didn't move. Neither did hers. Instead, she closed her eyes briefly, as though surrendering to something inevitable, then opened them again, meeting me squarely. We didn't kiss. But her hand, trembling slightly, found its way back to mine. This time, she held on. Her hand and mine should have been enough. But it wasn't. The silence between us pressed heavier than the tick of the office clock, heavier than the knowledge that the hallway outside wasn't truly empty. Her thumb moved against my skin, barely, a nervous shift, but to me, it felt like the whole world had tilted. "Clara," I said, my voice rough, unsteady. She tried to pull back, but I tightened my hold, just enough to stop her. Not enough to trap. "You don't know what you're doing," she whispered. I stepped closer. Close enough to see the faint streak of gray in her hair, the tired gloss of her lipstick, the way her chest rose and fell too quickly. "I know exactly what I'm doing." Her eyes flashed. "Anger? Fear? Or something more dangerous? You're playing with fire. Then let it burn." She made a sound, half laugh, half groan, and covered her face with her free hand. "God, you're impossible." I reached up before I could stop myself, brushing her hand gently away. My fingers lingered at her cheek, the warmth of her skin shocking against my cold palms. She froze, not retreating, not advancing, just staring at me as though I'd crossed a line that couldn't be erased. "You'll regret this," she said, but her voice trembled. "Then let me." The words hung, raw, final. She shook her head yet didn't move. Instead, her forehead tipped toward me, just slightly, so close that I could feel the ghost of her breath across my lips. 24, she murmured. "I promised myself I'd never." Her sentence broke off when I tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My knuckles grazed her skin. She shivered. "Clara," I whispered, closer now. "Stop thinking for once." Her hands, which had been pressed tight against her sides, suddenly found my chest, resting there, not pushing me away, not pulling me closer, just trembling. "This is insane," she breathed. "Then let's be insane." For a moment, her weight leaned into me, subtle but undeniable. I could feel the softness of her body against mine, the press of her palms through my shirt. My pulse thundered so loudly I thought she must hear it. "Someone will see," she whispered, though her voice had lost its edge, fraying at the corners. "Then we'll close the door." Her lips parted. The hesitation was all that stood between us and something we couldn't undo. "I can't," she said, even as her hands curled slightly, gripping my shirt. Yes, you can. Our eyes locked, too long, too deep. I could see every flicker in her expression: fear, longing, regret, something dangerously close to surrender. I leaned in, inch by inch. Her breath caught, her lashes fluttering closed, her mouth a whisper from mine. The office phone rang. We both jerked as if struck, the shrill sound cutting through the heavy silence. She stepped back, her arms wrapping around herself, eyes wide, guilty. Neither of us moved to answer. The phone rang and rang, echoing in the dim room, before finally stopping. Her chest heaved. My fists clenched. We stared at each other, the space between us charged, unbearable. Then she whispered, voice low, breaking. If you kiss me, there's no going back. The phone's silence left the room even louder than before. Clara stood rigid, arms wrapped across her chest as though bracing against the echo of her own words. If you kiss me, there's no going back. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. The moment teetered there, fragile, when a sharp ping broke it again. Her phone. Clara glanced down, frowning at the glowing screen. She hesitated, then unlocked it. The color drained from her face. What is it? I asked. She turned the phone toward me. A text. Just one line. People are starting to talk. Be careful. No name, just a number she clearly recognized. My stomach dropped. Who? Diane, she said quickly, locking the phone again, as though hiding the words might erase them. Her hands shook as she set it face down on the desk. She saw us earlier. She must have. Clara trailed off, pressing her fingers to her temple. God. The air shifted instantly. What had felt like secret safety, the late-night quiet, the shadows between blinds, now felt like exposure, every corner of the office a place where eyes might linger. I stepped forward, instinct pulling me to her. Then let me talk to her. I'll. No. Clara's hand shot out, pressing lightly against my chest. Not forceful, but firm enough to stop me. If you say anything, it'll only confirm what she suspects. Her palm lingered on me for a moment too long, the heat of it searing even through my shirt. Then she pulled back, wrapping her arms around herself again, retreating behind distance. I tried to laugh, tried to make it lighter. So what if they talk? It's not a crime to. Her eyes flashed. It's not that simple. The sharpness in her voice cut me short. She paced, one hand in her hair, the other clenching at her side. I've worked here for almost 20 years. I've kept my head down, done everything right, never given anyone reason to. Her words faltered. She exhaled, low and trembling. Do you understand what this could cost me? I didn't answer right away. My hands curled into fists at my sides. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. Finally, I said quietly, And what about me? That made her stop. She turned, her expression cracking. What about you? She echoed, softer. I closed the gap between us. Not too close, but close enough that when I spoke, my voice was barely above her ear. You think this is just something I'll walk away from? Like it's just a mistake I'll regret in the morning? Her lips parted, but no words came. I reached up, hesitating only a second before brushing a strand of hair from her face. My fingers grazed her temple, and she shivered. Tell me to stop, and I will, I whispered. Her breath caught. For a second, her body leaned toward me, then she stepped back sharply, hitting the edge of the desk. I can't, she said, though it sounded less like refusal and more like confession. The room pulsed with tension. My chest rose and fell too quickly. Her hands gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white, as if bracing herself. You can't what? I asked. She shook her head. I can't stop thinking about it. The words landed between us, heavy, irreversible. Her shoulders slumped as if the weight of them had finally broken through her restraint. She looked at me, raw and unguarded, and for once she didn't turn away. Slowly, deliberately, I stepped into the space she had left. Our bodies brushed, not fully, just enough to feel the heat, the magnetic pull neither of us could keep denying. Her hands trembled at her sides before finally, tentatively, lifting. She didn't touch me, not yet. But she didn't retreat either. "We're already too far in," she whispered, her voice unsteady but certain. And in that moment we both knew there was no turning back. The confession hung in the air. I can't stop thinking about it, and neither of us moved, afraid the wrong step might shatter everything. Her eyes locked on mine, wide, unblinking. My breath felt too loud, my heart too fast. I leaned closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off her, close enough to see the tiny freckles dusted across her cheekbones. My voice dropped, raw. "Then don't stop." Clara's lips parted, a tremor running through her as though she were caught between fleeing and falling. Her hands hovered near my chest, fingers curling, uncertain. "This is wrong," she whispered, though her body didn't move away. "Then let's be wrong," I whispered back. For a long, aching moment, we stood there, the space between us no more than a breath. Her forehead tilted against mine, soft and tentative. I closed my eyes, every nerve alive with the nearness of her. Her hand finally touched me, flat against my chest, right over my pounding heart. The contact was so simple, so bare, that it almost undid me more than any kiss could. I covered her hand with mine. "Tell me to stop, Clara. Just say the word." Her silence said everything. So I leaned in, and this time she didn't retreat. Our lips brushed, hesitant, trembling, the faintest taste of something forbidden finally breaking through. She gasped against me, and I almost pulled back, afraid I'd gone too far. But then she pressed forward, closing the gap fully, her mouth finding mine in a kiss that was messy, searching, desperate. Years of restraint poured out of her in that single moment, and I matched it, unable to hold back. Her hands fisted in my shirt, pulling me closer, while mine cupped her face, thumbs brushing the warmth of her cheeks. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. It was too much and not enough, lips parting too quickly, breath catching awkwardly, the weight of everything unsaid crashing into every touch. But it was real. Raw. Ours. When we finally broke apart, her forehead rested against mine again, our breaths mingling in the charged silence. Her eyes were wet, not tears, but something close. "We can't keep this quiet forever," she murmured. "I don't care who knows," I said, too quickly, too fiercely. She laughed softly, shaking her head, though her hands stayed on me. "You don't understand the cost." "But," she hesitated, her voice breaking into something softer, "I don't want to lose this either." I kissed her again, slower this time, lingering, sealing the unspoken choice between us. When we pulled back, I said quietly, "Then we don't run from it." "Not anymore." She searched my face, as though waiting for me to falter, to back down. But I didn't. At last, she exhaled, her shoulders easing. Her fingers smoothed the collar of my shirt, a small, intimate gesture that felt heavier than any kiss. "All right," she whispered, as if giving herself permission. "Then we stop pretending." And in that quiet, dim office, with blinds closed against the outside world, we finally stood together, not in secrecy, not in hesitation, but in clarity. The office felt different now. Same four walls, same blinds drawn tight, but the air had shifted, lighter somehow, though still trembling with what had just happened. Clara sat on the edge of her desk, her hands folded loosely in her lap. She wouldn't quite meet my eyes, though her mouth curved in a faint, uncertain smile. I stood close, maybe too close, but neither of us moved to widen the gap. 20 years, she said softly, almost to herself. "I've worked here 20 years. Always careful. Always invisible." She looked up then, meeting my gaze squarely. "And now this?" I shrugged, helpless, my hands spreading at my sides. "Maybe you were invisible to them. Not to me." Her breath caught, the smile faltering. She shook her head, but not in dismissal, more like she was trying to steady herself. "You don't even hear yourself. You say things that..." She broke off, her voice roughening. "That I want to believe." I stepped closer, slow enough that she could stop me if she wanted. She didn't. My hand found hers where it rested in her lap. Her fingers trembled at first, then softened, twining with mine. "I mean them," I said quietly. For a long moment, she only stared at our joined hands. Then she let out a shaky laugh, the kind that breaks tension without really letting it go. "God, you're stubborn." I smiled. "So are you." Her free hand reached up then, brushing over my jaw in a gesture so gentle it almost undid me. "This will be hard," she said. "Most things worth it are." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against mine. The simple weight of her there, warm, steady, was more grounding than any words could have been. My arms slid around her, pulling her close until she melted against me, her cheek finding my shoulder. For the first time, she didn't resist. She let herself lean, let herself rest. And I held her, breathing in the faint trace of her perfume, the softness of her hair brushing my chin. Neither of us spoke for a while. We didn't need to. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of everything we just admitted, everything we were no longer pretending to ignore. Finally, she pulled back slightly, her eyes shining in the dim light. "You know people will talk. Let them," I said. She smiled then, really smiled, and it was softer, younger somehow, like she just laid something heavy down. She laced our fingers tighter, her thumbs stroking across my knuckles. "Then I guess we'll face it together." I kissed her forehead, lingering there, breathing her in. When she sighed, it wasn't with regret, it was with release. The office clock ticked on. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed. But in that small space between us, everything felt finally, irrevocably clear. We weren't off the clock anymore. We were exactly where we needed to be. Together.